Good morning, everybody. um, Welcome back to another video. I want to first of all say that this video is for educational and informational purposes only, and it is intended for anyone that enjoys this type of content. I'm now going to be speaking again pertaining to an organization I'm a part of, the United House of Prayer for All People, and I'm speaking pertaining to the corruption within our leadership. I'm talking in this video, we're continuing with the Constitution of our organization that governs, supposed to govern the organization. And we're picking up where we left off in Article 5, Section 9, where we were talking about the General Assembly and their powers. So picking up here, I'll read once again to you. And in this particular booklet, the 2009 Constitution, and we're now on this page. Okay, to make sure that everyone can read along with me. You can even freeze frame so that you can make notes and read along with me. Here in Section 9, the General Assembly shall have on 2/3 vote authority to, the 2/3 vote is called a quorum. That 2/3 vote must be out of the individuals that's present. So if there's 100 people present in the General Assembly on that particular occasion, then 66 or more people are needed to vote yes in favor of in order for something to be changed. If they don't get 66 or more, then it cannot be changed. If there's 200 people, then of course you just double that. That's 132 people or more out of 200. So you have to have 2/3 out of the number of individuals that are actually there for things to be done in favor of. But the General Assembly shall have on 2/3 vote the authority to do three things. One, amend the Constitution and bylaws. They are the only individuals in the General Assembly that has the authority to amend the bylaws. Now, we're going to come back to that in a moment. B, whenever a vacancy occurs in the office of the bishop, they have the authority to fill this vacancy from among the regular ministers of this organization of the same faith and order. They also have the authority on 2/3 vote to try and remove for cause the bishop pursuant to Article 7 of this Constitution and bylaws. Now, let's go back and pick this apart. Section 9, the first power that they have in the General Assembly. Mind you, these powers no one else has in the organization. The bishop cannot do any of these things. He does not have the authority. He does not have the power to do any of these things. The general counsel cannot do any of these things. They do not have the authority. They do not have the power to do any of these three things. Therefore, because it is the General Assembly that actually makes the CEO, they elect the CEO. They're supposed to. They haven't been. We'll talk about that in a moment. But they're supposed to elect the CEO, which is the bishop. And they are the ones who change the laws, revise, correct, amend, even remove. The General Assembly only, nobody else. So we've talked about the revision, Constitution Revision Committee, that there is no such thing. That was an illegal act that the bishops have been doing. But because they've been getting away with it, it's been allowed because the people didn't know any better. Again, this is why we're going over the Constitution, to make everybody aware of what it is that they can and cannot do. Why it is that the members of the organization have constantly and consistently and repeatedly, year after year, been duped, hoodwinked, bamboozled, whatever word you want to give it. You've been conned, You've been railroaded, the whole nine. With that said, the General Assembly is the only one that can amend the Constitution. Now, why am I going over that? Because, again, let's go to the beginning of the Constitution. Let's see. This page, flip it over, one page, and what you're going to find is, let's see. Look at this right here. Amended April 1962 in Washington, D.C. Amended May 1963, Washington, D.C. Amended May 1973, Washington, D.C. Okay? By who? Bishop W. McCullough. Now we have a problem. Let's go forward. Here, it says what? Amended. When? May 1992 in Washington, D.C. Amended here, May 2002, Washington, D.C. By who? Bishop S.C. Madison. We have a problem. You see where this is going? I keep telling people you have to learn the laws so that you know what it is that people can and cannot do. Now, let's go a step further. Watch this carefully. What does that word say? Amended. May 2009, Washington, D.C. By who? Bishop C.M. Bailey. Okay? Now, question for you. Who does the Constitution give the authority and the power to amend the Constitution? Well, again, let's go back. It says, Section 9, Article 5, the General Assembly, and says the General Assembly shall have on 2/3 vote authority to amend the Constitution and bylaws. Nowhere in the Constitution does it give anybody else, including the bishop, the authority or the power to amend the Constitution or bylaws. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at evidence that tells us, it does not suggest to us, it tells us concretely that the bishops have been violating the laws of the Constitution. They've been amending it. They don't have the authority to do so. They don't have the powers to do so. So whenever you see in the front of these booklets, and it says, look at those first two words here, adopted amendments. Well, who adopted them? We're going to come back to that in just a moment. Now, one second. Okay. These first four words here. The Constitutional Revision Committee, a standing committee of the General Assembly. The next line. Now, how is that a standing committee of the General Assembly? Where is it in the Constitution that says the General Assembly, they have a standing committee known as the Constitution Revision Committee? There is no such thing. It was made up. And it was made up in order to make it appear as if it's legitimate, to make it look like it's legal. So they put it in the book because they know that our people don't know or understand the law. And they've been getting away with this, okay? So the problem is, as a result of doing this openly and right in the face of the members of the organization, we don't need anything else in order to prove that the bishops have been violating the Constitution by amending it. They didn't have the authority to do so. But the members of the House of Prayer didn't know that. The members of the House of Prayer didn't have anybody to teach them that. The members of the House of Prayer didn't have the General Assembly Secretary or the council or the bishop or anybody else for that matter sit them down and go over the laws with them to make them understand what the responsibilities and the obligations of the General Assembly is for. Now, here's your deal. The bishop has his own responsibilities given to him. His job is to run the organization, to oversee the day-to-day operations of the organization, i.e., somewhat to manage. He is nothing more than a glorified manager. This is why he's called the chief executive officer. He works for the organization. He does not rule the organization. Therefore, whenever we hear the current bishop, A.D. Cunningham, talking about he's a king, the Constitution doesn't make you a king. The Constitution does not give you the authority nor the power of a king. So we're going to pick that apart in just a minute when we get to the next article and uncover where this all came from, okay? Because it was strategically done, it was coyly done, and it was quite smooth the way they did this. But anyway, let's continue. So every single bishop has messed up because they revised and amended the Constitution. And it's written right there in the Constitution. Now, here's the final. This is the 2023, the May 2023, okay? This is the 2022. Now, why is it that we have two constitutions a year apart? Because there's information in one constitution, the 22 has information in it that is still in the 23, but the 23 has new information in it that's not in the 22. Anytime the bishop adds information to the Constitution, they just changed it unlawfully. It is an illegal act. It makes the Constitution null and void. Why? Because they are criminally stealing power and distributing that power amongst themselves. By themselves, I mean the bishop is giving power to others that they're kind of taking care of and they're using to actually take care of them. In other words, they're setting up individuals around them and using the Constitution to do so in order to protect them in the event that somebody catches them doing something wrong. Mind you, the General Assembly, again, is the place that makes a bishop, and that's part A. That's B. Article 5, Section 9A. That covers the General Assembly Secretary. All these words, let me slow down. In fact, let me touch on that for a moment. I'm going to slow myself down so that everything I'm saying, you will be able to understand and follow me. I don't want to go, I keep telling myself not to go too fast because I need everybody to understand how this works so that you will not continue being deceived and manipulated and lied to. So in slowing this down, you should be able to take good, clear, precise notes so that you will understand forevermore what it is that they can and cannot do. So with that said, I'm going to speak at this pace as we go forward so that everybody understands clearly what it is that we're talking about. Now, I have said in the Constitution, we are now on Article 5. All of these sections are under Article 5, and we're reading now Section 9. Under Section 9, you have A, B, and C. Each one of these give another power to the General Assembly, since in this particular article of the Constitution, we're talking about the General Assembly. Okay, we already spoke about the bishop. We're going to be talking about the bishop again. But right now, the Constitution is delegating power to do certain things to certain people. In the Section 9, the Constitution, which is used to govern the entire organization, keep in mind, let me step back for a moment. Whenever you see Article 3, composition. Article 3, composition. The reason why that's important is because the composition lets us know who the organization is. It says the organization shall be composed of the bishop, prophet. We're going to fix that too. The bishop, the elders, the ministers, the deacons, trustee of the house of prayer, and all persons who shall in good faith congregate in the various places of assembly maintained by this organization. We've already covered this in another video, but my point is that in the organization, it is composed of everyone, including the bishop. Now, why is that important? Because the Constitution is for the governing of the organization known as the United House of Prayer for All People. Now, if this booklet is used to govern the organization, see, this is why we need this. If it's used to govern the organization, of which the bishop is a part of the organization, under Article 3, yes, the composition. If it says in the Constitution that the bishop is a part of the composition of the organization, then the bishop is also governed by the Constitution. The bishop does not have power over the Constitution. The bishop does not have authority to neglect the Constitution. The bishop is not the Constitution. The bishop is not the law. The bishop does not make the law. The bishop cannot sidestep the law. The bishop cannot circumvent the law. And the bishop certainly cannot ignore the law. This is the absolute most important book of the entire organization. And everybody in it, including the bishop, must be held accountable to this book. This is the one book that is supposed to govern. I said supposed to, because they haven't been using it to govern the organization. They've been using it to lie, steal, manipulate, and cheat the members of the organization. But we're going to do something about that. We're going to take the entire crew of them and align them with the law. This is why our leadership has gone rogue. This is why the bishop does not want to act as if he's suspended, because he knows that he has not been acting according to the Constitution. So anyway, we're going to get to the end of this. I remember I want to stay within a 30-minute timeline. So that said, the bishop is not over the Constitution. He's a part of the composition of the organization, which means the Constitution is supposed to govern him as well. Now, the Constitution is what gives powers to certain people. The Constitution does give power to the bishop, but the Constitution also gives power to the people. The people, the members of the organization, make up the General Assembly. The General Assembly, according to the Constitution, has the authority, the only ones that have the authority to amend the Constitution and bylaws, period. So whenever you see in the Constitution that a bishop amended the law, they're telling you, because they didn't stop to think at all. I don't know what in the world. Anyway, they're telling you that we cheated you all. We robbed you all. We violated the law that's supposed to govern us also. And I don't want to call anybody stupid. I don't want to. People made errors. And the errors that they made is written in the Constitution. So we don't need to find evidence. The Constitution is the evidence. And that's why Bishop Cunningham does not want to come forward, because he knows the moment we have a trial, he's done. The Constitution did not give him the authority to do what he's been doing. The General Counsel, they also know that as soon as we have a trial, they are all done, because they have hijacked the entire organization by doing what they've been doing year after year after year in the General Assembly, and completely doing the things that the Constitution says that they don't have the power, the authority to do. They've taken control. They've put the organization in a chokehold, and they've suffocated it to almost to death. They've beat the organization down, and now it's time for the members to understand the law so that you can take your powers back. This is how you take the powers back. Therefore, when we go back to the General Assembly once again, this upcoming General Assembly, it will not ever be the same. It will not be the way that it has been, where people are just waiting on the bishop to arrive and clapping their hands and being distracted by musicians and bands. The council getting up to sing a song, that is the absolute most idiotic. It's so bad that they've been slapping everybody in the house of prayer in the face by doing all of this stuff. To sing a song in the General Assembly to the bishop. Let's go ahead and get through this. At the back of the book, where it says, no, let me use the new one, 23, where it says, as revised and approved by the General Assembly on May 27, 2022. Do you all understand now that that's a lie? When they printed these books up, this was already there, but they hadn't had the meeting yet. So how do you know that the General Assembly is going to approve if they had not even met? They haven't even voted yet. And the houses had not even passed the amendments forward as a proposal to go to the General Assembly so that the proposal would become eventually an amendment because it passed the election, the voting process of the General Assembly. No bishop can have an amendment in the order of the General Assembly meeting. It is, we're supposed to have proposals written. Those proposals remain proposals until they are passed through the General Assembly. Once they're passed through the General Assembly and they are now going to change the Constitution, that proposal now becomes an amendment in the Constitution. The Constitution has now been amended. But whenever you see a list of amendments that's a part of the order of business for the General Assembly for that year, that means you've been duped already. We've been duped so badly. Before you even sit down in the General Assembly, they're letting you know that we're about to rob you again. And that's what's happened. So this whole thing is null and void. It's garbage. It's garbage, really. 22, same thing. The only difference between 22 and 23 is they had the count of the votes written inside of 23 because they didn't have a vote count in 22. These were already printed up. And this is what I keep saying. For those of you who are watching for the first time and y'all don't understand, these books were already printed up and they were made available to be sold after the General Assembly of 2022. So they gave the impression to the organization that the amendments that are now in this Constitution was done by the people. They gave the false impression, which is fraud, and they have defrauded the entire organization again and again and again. By they, I mean our leaders, including the bishop. He's the culprit behind it, and the one behind him is a part of this, and that is Lady D. With that in mind, this is null and void. It's trash. But because we don't have the original Constitution as of yet that we can go by, I'm utilizing the 2009 in order to bring these charges forward. Now, here's your thing. Let's look at the back of 2009. Okay? It's the same thing. Revised and approved by the General Assembly, May 22nd, 2009. Okay? May 22nd, 2009. But if you look in the front of the book, it will tell you also, I'm showing y'all how to use these laws to understand how people are getting over on you. In the front of the book, look, amended May 2009 in Washington, D.C. by Bishop C.M. Bailey. It was not amended by the General Assembly. And the bishops are telling you, all of them are telling you, Bishop McCullough, Bishop Madison, Bishop C.M. Bailey, and the last bishop, which is the current bishop, Bishop A.D. Cunningham, he's got books coming out. He was smart. He was smart because 2024, last year, he had another General Assembly and he did everything he could to keep me out. The charge for that is known as evasion, as well as, on the tip of my tongue, I'm gonna come back to this. It's on the tip of my tongue, but you're getting around justice. When you know that you've committed criminal activity, somebody has caught you, there's a charge they want to bring forward on you, but you're acting now to do everything that you can to keep yourself from being brought forward so that you can be tried and held accountable. Tip of my tongue. But the point of the matter is, evasion is a criminal act. And there's another one. But anyway, that's where he kept me out of the General Assembly so that I could not bring this forward. Now, we have another problem because Sister Mickey Bailey was the attorney that he used in order to conduct this illegal activity, which is why I've said before, and I'm going to say again, she put herself in a precarious situation by doing this because she should have known better. Her job as an officer of the court of the land is to represent the law in such a way that she's advising any client to do things within the confinements of the law, not to bend, not to break the law, but to act within the law to do things legitimately and legally. She has now put herself in a position where she's committed illegal acts, not just by advising, ill advisement at that, ill meaning illegal, wrong advisement, bad advisement, ill, instead of giving accurate, true, and correct, good advisement, so that they would not be breaking the law. With that in mind, she even stamped or signed her name on a suggestion also indicating that she was a part of the Constitutional Revision Committee, which itself is an illegal committee. There is no such committee because the Constitution does not give the power or the authority to such a committee to revise the Constitution. So when I say that these constitutions are null and void, it's because we've seen that the bishops have amended them outside of the will, outside of the consent of the people. And now we have constitutions with things in them that the bishop placed there for his own reasons, which is to give him more and more and more power. We're going to read one more now, or some more right after this. Going back to section 9. Okay. Whenever a vacancy occurs in the office of the bishop, the General Assembly, nobody else, not the council, no one, the General Assembly, meaning the people, nobody gets to appoint a bishop. But that's what's been going on. Nobody gets to set up a bishop. A bishop has no power to point to another bishop, and a bishop has no authority given to them by the Constitution to even groom another bishop. But they've been doing this because they stole power from the Constitution. I'm going to show you that as well in the Constitution, how they did it. Whenever a vacancy occurs in the office of the bishop, to fill this vacancy from among the regular ministers of this organization of the same faith and order, only the General Assembly has the power to do that. Now, I'm going to go ahead over 30 minutes so that I can finish this. It won't be long. The General Assembly is the only one that has the power to make bishops. Now, you see the portion that says from among the regular ministers? Let's go back and deal with that as well. In Article 2, the purpose, Article 2, the purpose, 1, not A, but B, 1B. Okay, let me pause for a moment so you can see this. All right, now let's look at it. Pastor, minister, and elder. We've covered this already. We're going to go to the end of that section. An elder so appointed by the bishop to head a congregation shall be known as a pastor or minister, period. An elder so appointed by the bishop to head a congregation shall be known as a pastor or minister. They do not have to be an apostle. They can be an elder, just elder. If they are a pastor, they are a minister. If they're heading the congregation, not the assistant pastor, not the youth pastor, but any elder that was the head of a congregation, known as a pastor or minister. Now, that does not say they have to be an apostle. Here's one more thing. It does not say that they have to have a credential. Okay, now you know where this is going. When you get to section 9B, it says, whenever a vacancy occurs in the office of the bishop to fill this vacancy from among the regular ministers of this organization of the same faith and order, that means any man that has fulfilled the office of pastoring as the head of a congregation. Now, it does not say that they must be a current pastor. It says from among the regular ministers. Quite simply put, the group of ministers that's in the organization. Any man that has fulfilled the office of pastor, the head of a congregation, that man is a minister. Okay, now you've heard me talk about how individuals can use that title as minister if they're assistant pastor or youth pastor, so on and so forth. However, if they've never headed a congregation, the Constitution does not allow them to use that title for the purposes of becoming bishop. Outside their House of Prayer organization, they can use the title of minister because they're fulfilling the obligation of a minister over a body of people. Whether they are the assistant pastor, they're the assistant minister outside. If they're a youth pastor, they are a youth minister outside. But that term minister in the House of Prayer organization, the Constitution does not give the assistant pastor, the youth pastor, or the assistant youth pastor the opportunity, the right to become nominated or elected as the bishop. It has to be somebody that has fulfilled the office of pastoring. It can be a current pastor. It can be a former pastor. But as long as they were in the office of a pastor, why is that important? Because they have experience of being over a congregation. And since they have experience of being over a congregation, it doesn't matter whether it's a small congregation or a large congregation, because by becoming a bishop, you're nothing more than a pastor of a larger congregation, being the entire membership of the organization. Okay, you're just the biggest pastor in the organization. You're held to a lot more responsibilities and obligations, but you're just the biggest pastor in the organization. The title is now given to you as bishop. Some people think the biggest pastor in the organization is the senior minister. Kind of, because he's still functioning as a pastor, but don't get it twisted. The bishop is still functioning as a pastor. He's just been given the responsibilities of overseeing everything in the organization rather than just one particular congregation in the organization. So that man does not have to have a credential in order to be nominated or elected from the regular ministers to become the bishop. Now, we're going to come back to that in a moment, because there was an individual that came through the General Assembly and he nominated himself to be elected. Now, it doesn't mean he's going to get elected. It means that he's nominating himself to have his name included amongst the ones that the people can elect. But the council got up, which is, again, a violation because the council has nothing to do with anything. The General Assembly also allowed what the council did. And what they did is they prevented that man from having his name nominated by saying that you are not a current minister. And that was an illegal act. And when the General Assembly Secretary at the time, Apostle A.D. Cunningham, approved of what they said and allowed it, that was also an illegal act. And why did he do it? Because he was making sure that his name was not in the pot amongst other names, which was only his own, to be elected. Okay, so I'm going to get back to that in a moment. But the last thing is the General Assembly, have the power and the authority to try and remove for cause the bishop pursuant to Article 7 of this Constitution and bylaws. They have the power to remove for reasons. It has to be a justifiable reason to have them brought to trial and, if found guilty, removed from the bishop's office pursuant to Article 7 of this Constitution. But the General Assembly is the only one that can do that. Okay? Nobody else can remove or put a bishop on trial. Now, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And then we're going to come back. There's going to be, I don't want to call it part 2, but it's going to be a continuation of Section 9 of Article 5 so that I can give you some more details. Anyway, with that said, I'll see you in the next video.